From perk combos that made people rage quit to combos that I can't even believe made it to the live build of the game, here are 20 of the most overpowered perk combinations in Dead by Daylight history. Number 1, this one's a classic, and this is the small PP build, as people like to call it. The small PP build was a survivor combination consisting of Unbreakable and Decisive Strike, and this was back when you couldn't really deactivate Decisive Strike. So with this combo, you put killers into a complete lose-lose situation, because if they downed you within 60 seconds of being unhooked, they either had to slug you on the ground, in which case you could use your Unbreakable to get up, or they pick you up and you could just use your DS to get out. So it was deemed the quote small PP build because it was essentially just a get out of jail free card. The next one on the list takes me back to the good old days, and this is Sloppy Thanatophobia. So both of these perks have been nerfed, and Thanatophobia is now like god awful. But back in the day, Thanatophobia gave survivors a -4 stackable repair, healing, and sabotage speed up to 16% depending on the amount of survivors that were injured. Yes, you heard me right. Thanatophobia also impacted healing speeds. So if all 4 survivors were injured, then everyone healed 16% slower. Now, I'm sure you can imagine why this was a fantastic perk to combo with Sloppy Butcher. Sloppy Butcher gives the survivors the Mangled status effect, which at the time reduced healing speed by 25%, but soon after got reduced to 20. But regardless of this stacking with the Thanatophobia healing speed, it meant that the survivors were put in this really weird situation where you have to be healing to get rid of the Thanatophobia stacks, but the healing takes so long that they're just wasting so much time. So on killers like Legion or Plague, who kept survivors injured a majority of the match, it was a devastating combination. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, I did just do a merch drop the other day. I really tried to make it look like regular clothes people would actually wear and not just slap my logo on it, and I think it turned out great. There's 2 versions, a pink cherry blossom version, which is like the regular edition, and then a gold edition with Subject 1 branding in reference to my DBD experiment videos. But the really cool thing that I'm super excited about is that the shirts and the hoodies have this unique feature where you get your own exclusive subject number depending on your position in the order, and there's only 100 of them. So they're limited, exclusive, and unique to you. So for example, if you're the 15th person to purchase the gold edition hoodie, the number on the hoodie will say subject 15. It's awesome. We also have mouse pads and posters and stickers and all those accessories. So if you're interested in any of this, feel free to go to the link in the description and come check it out. We already have a ton of orders, which is insane. So I really appreciate all your guys' support. The next one on the list is going to my beloved Spine Chill Resilience. I'm sure all of you know about this, unless you're a very, very new DBD player. This perk combination was called the Vault Speed build, and it was used in so many videos on YouTube, but it was such a fun perk combination to use. I know Spine Chill is like absolutely terrible nowadays, but it used to do something a little bit different. For the old version of this perk, as long as the killer was within 36 meters of your location and they were looking in your direction, all of your action speeds, including vaulting, were increased by 6%. And Resilience makes it so that all of your action speeds are increased by 9% whenever you're injured. So if you pair these two together, it becomes the ultimate vault speed build, allowing you to vault 15% faster when you're in chase. Now, 15% doesn't sound that much, but I'm sure all of you have been hit like 3 feet away from the window at some point in your life. The vault speed build not only saved you in some really, really tight situations, but it also helped you avoid a lot of those like really dumb ping hits. What did they do to my boy? Spine Chill is so ass now. The next perk combination I have on my list is one that I'm surprised not as many people use. This is one of my personal favorite perk combinations, and this is Spirit Fury Enduring. Oh my god, I absolutely love this perk combo. It is so unbelievably fun to use. I'm sure all of you know what Enduring does. It reduces your pallet stun duration, but a lot of you might not know what Spirit Fury is. Spirit Fury activates whenever you break 2 pallets, and then the next pallet that stuns you automatically breaks on its own. So if you pair that with Enduring, not only does the pallet barely stun you, the pallet also breaks, basically letting you get a free hit. So if you're using, for example, an M1 killer like Wraith, throw this combo on, and I promise you, you will be able to get so many more hits than you would have otherwise. The next perk combination on this list is actually a combination of 3 different perks that all go perfectly in tandem with each other, and this is one of the best combinations for stealth survivor players. And this is Lithe, Quick and Quiet, and Dance With Me. Unfortunately, this combo is a little hit or miss depending on the map, but if you get a map that has a lot of line of sight blockers, like indoor maps, for example, this is one of the most broken builds in DBD, and it hasn't been changed. Like, it still exists right now. You can use it right now, and it's so fun. I'm sure all of you know what Lithe is, but if if you don't, it's an exhaustion perk that activates when you vault a window, putting you into a sprint burst for 3 seconds after vaulting that window. Quick and Quiet makes you vault completely silently and then it goes on a cooldown. And Dance With Me removes your scratch marks for 3 seconds after vaulting a window. So all 3 of these perks activate when you fast vault a window or a pallet, which makes them synergize perfectly with each other. You vault the window completely silently, so if the killer doesn't see you, they don't know that you vaulted it. You start running super fast and you don't leave scratch marks. So if the killer doesn't have eyes on you, they will not find you. Like, they literally won't find you. Imagine you're on like Larry's, for example, and you vault one of the 16 billion windows on that map. If the killer wasn't watching you vault, even if they were, you have so much distance from them and so many corners to turn without them being able to see your scratch marks that you'll lose them no matter what. Like almost 95% of the time, you will just lose them. It is insane. You should try it. It's really fun. All right, the next killer combination on this list was also one of my personal favorites, and this was Ruin Surveillance. So back in the day, Ruin was an extremely good meta perk. It would automatically regress generators at 200% speed if survivors were not working on them. So the slowdown that you would get from this was insane. But when you paired this with Surveillance, it took this to a completely different level. I feel like Surveillance is one of the most underutilized perks right now. So if you don't know what it is, it essentially turns generators white when they're regressing. And then if a survivor stops the regression, it turns yellow for a few seconds. So for example, if you kick a generator, it'll turn white. And then as soon as somebody gets on the gen and stops it from regressing, then it turns yellow for a few seconds. So you know that that gen stopped regressing. So I'm sure you can imagine when you pair this with Ruin, which automatically regresses, it was free information for days. Like, it was insane. You had so much information about which gens were being worked on, which gens were regressing, which gens you should take control of. And if you use this combo on Freddy, for example, who is actually like a killer back in the day, you could do the fake teleport trick to any gen on the map from anywhere on the map just to see if the survivors would get off, revealing that they were working on the gen. And technically you can still use this combo, but Ruin is just a lot worse nowadays. So realistically, I don't know if it's worth running anymore. The next combination, which I'm very surprised is not used more often, and this is Flip Flop and Power Struggle. This is still in the game, and if you use this combination right with a duo, it is like practically uncounterable. It's kind of insane, and I'm surprised that not that many people use it. If you don't know, Flip Flop essentially converts 50% of your recovery progress into wiggle progression. So if you have 100% recovery progress, which obviously isn't realistic, but you know what I mean, you'll have 50% wiggle progression as soon as you're picked up. And then the perk Power Struggle makes it so that you can throw down pallets when you're being carried by the killer, as long as your wiggle progression is more than 15%. So what this means is if you die on a pallet and the killer doesn't immediately pick you up and you're able to get enough recovery progress to reach that 15% threshold, you are getting off the killer's shoulders as soon as they pick you up. And the reason this is so broken is because A, you can pair it with other perks to make this even easier, such as Unbreakable, which makes your recovery progress faster, allowing you to reach that threshold quicker, or Tenacity, so that if you don't die on a pallet, you can crawl to one easier. But also B, if you have a friend that's looping kind of near you, if you go down on a pallet, the killer can't do anything. They are forced to chase your friend, because if you go down on a pallet and the killer picks you up, your friend can pallet save you. But if the killer doesn't pick you up, then that allows you to reach the 15% threshold that Power Struggle needs. So no matter what the killer does, they can't pick you up. It's kind of broken in my opinion, so I'm glad it's a little bit low key. All right, moving on to the next one. I gotta get this out of the way. This was probably the single worst meta in DBD history, and this was Call of Brine Overcharge. If you were one of the lucky few to not have to endure this era of DBD, Call of Brine made it so that whenever you kicked a gen, it regressed at 200% of the normal regression. And for 60 seconds, if a survivor gets on that gen and hits a good skill check, you'll receive a loud noise notification so you know that someone's working on that gen. But this also stacked with Overcharge, which also activated when you kicked a gen. The gen regression started at 75% regression, so it was doing a little less regression. But over the course of 30 seconds, that regression would go up to 200%. So after 30 seconds, the gens would be regressing at 400%. 400%. That is insane. That is double the old Ruin. And on top of that, kicking a gen with Overcharge would also give survivors a very difficult skill check, which is still hard for veteran players to hit sometimes. And if you fail that skill check, the gen regresses by 5%. So it was just so much regression packed into these two perks, and you could pair it with two other regression perks to make it like literally the most miserable experience of your life. If you were there during this era, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was awful. Okay, moving on to the next survivor combo. This is one that I really enjoy, and it's still in the game. This is Kindred and Open-Handed. If you're a solo queue player, this is one of the most powerful combinations that you could run. Kindred makes it so that if a survivor gets put on on the hook, you can see the killer's aura as long as they're within 16 meters of the hooked survivor, as well as being able to see the auras of every other survivor on the map. But also, if you're the one that's on the hook, every other survivor can see the aura of the killer as long as they're within 16 meters of your hook, and every other survivor can see each other's auras. So that already is a phenomenal perk. I love Kindred. It's great. But then you throw that with open-handed, which increases the radius of all aura reading abilities by another 16 meters, doubling the already good aura reading of Kindred. And it is insane. The distance that the killer can be from the hook while you still have wall hacks on them is absurd. I'll try to find some gameplay of this to show you how unbelievably broken it is. But like when you throw these two perks on, you'll be in shock at how much distance the killer can get away from the hook while you're still seeing their aura. It is wild. I love this combo. All right, we got the Call of the Brine overcharge combo out of the way. We got to get the other one out of the way. This is Ruin Undying. I don't know what was more miserable, the Call of Brine gen kick meta or the OG Ruin Undying meta. Undying is in a pretty healthy spot nowadays where it essentially just gives your hex perks an extra life. But when this perk came out, oh my God, I actually want to throw up just thinking about it. This perk spawned in as another hex totem on the map. So if you have Ruined and Undying, there'll be two lit totems on the map. But if survivors cleanse the Ruined totem instead of the Undying totem, which keep in mind they have no discernible difference at all, then the hex totem gets transferred to another dull totem on the map. And if the survivors cleanse that new Ruined totem, it'll get transferred again to another dull totem and then repeat until all totems are gone. So Undying could allow you to get 3 extra lives for your hex perks. It was crazy. Now imagine this perk combo on a map like one of the swamps where the totems can literally spawn on the edges of the map, or something like RPD where they can be hidden in these tiny corners. It was unbelievably broken. And this was also back when Ruin was 200% regression. So you could essentially have Ruin up the entire game and get so much value out of it. And obviously you could use this with other hex perks as well to get multiple uses of those hex perks. But in general, the best option was to pair it with Ruin. And some people even went the extra mile and threw Pop Goes the Weasel. So on the off chance that the survivors accidentally cleanse the Undying totem and then the Ruin totem, being able to get rid of it immediately, then you still have Pop to regress the gens. All right, the next combination on this list is Boil Over Breakout. Luckily, this combination was patched relatively quickly, but when it was in the game, it was absurdly annoying to the point where it was completely uncounterable. In one of DBD's updates, they buffed Boil Over to make it so much better. At this time, Boil Over increased the strength of your wiggling effects on the killer by 100%. So you wouldn't wiggle out faster, you would just wiggle the killer side to side harder, which helped get them stuck on like doors and such, making it a little bit more difficult for them to hook you, but that wasn't really that big of a deal. It also completely hides the auras of any hooks within 16 meters of the killer. So if they don't know about a certain hook around the corner, for example, then they might go to a hook that's further away, wasting more of their time. But the thing that got buffed was that this perk now granted you a 25% increase to your wiggle progression if the killer drops from a height while they're carrying you. So it instantly went up 25% when they would touch the ground. Now this was broken. Back in the day, RPD used to have a third story in the library that you could go up to. And survivors would go up to that third story when the killer was chasing them, go down, and then when the killer picked them up, the killer had to not only fall from a height because they were on the third story, increasing the wiggle progress by 25%, but they also had to deal with their teammates who had Breakout, making the wiggle progress even faster. If you don't know, if you have Breakout on, if you're within 5 meters of a killer carrying another survivor, you become 7% faster, and the survivor's wiggling speed is increased by 25%. So this, in combination with the 25% boost that Boil Over gave you every time the killer would fall from a height, I'm sure you can imagine why this was extremely annoying whenever the survivors would go up to the third story of the building to use this perk combo. It was uncounterable to the point where DBD fixed it within 2 weeks. That's how unbelievably strong this combination was. But even that doesn't even come remotely close to the next combination on this list, which is Unrelenting, Save the Best for Last. Now this is an OG perk combination if I've ever seen one. If you've seen some of my previous videos, I have talked about this perk combination, but if you haven't, you may be confused why Unrelenting is ever in an overpowered list ever. Well, let me explain. Unrelenting, at one point in its life, made it so that the cooldown of missed attacks was reduced by 30%, similar to what it is today, but it also decreased the cooldown of successful attacks by 22%. So regardless of what you did with your weapon, it was a faster cooldown. When Save the Best for Last came out with Myers during the Halloween chapter, it did the exact same thing as Unrelenting, but with different numbers. It decreased the cooldown duration of missed basic attacks by 20% and reduced the cooldown duration of missed successful attacks by 30%. 33%. So, as I'm sure you can imagine, if you combine these two together, it makes it so that your missed attacks are reduced by 50%. So they're twice as fast. And it also makes it so that your successful basic attacks are reduced by 55%. So you could swing so unbelievably fast. I'll show some footage on screen of what that looks like. It was essentially like your hands were fully automatic. It was crazy. Obviously, this was completely absurd because you had like no slowdown from hitting the survivors, which completely breaks the balance of the game. And guess what? This was in the game from the end of October in 2016 all the way until the end of April in 2017. But luckily, people weren't as meta back then, so a lot of people didn't really know about it. All right, the next combination on this list is something a little more recent, and this is For the People Buckle Up. Now, all the cool people remember the OG version of this perk combination, which was For the People Soul Guard, but Buckle Up completely took over that spot because it did the same exact thing, but way better. Now, Buckle Up used to be one of the worst perks in the entire game, so they decided to buff it, and oh boy, that went well. The new version of this perk made it so that if you were healing a survivor that was in the dying state, both of you could see the aura of the killer, which was a nice little bonus, but nothing too broken. But then, as soon as you heal the survivor, both you and the survivor you just healed get endurance for 10 seconds. The killer can't hit either of you for 10 seconds. That is already insane, considering that there's no prerequisite to activate this perk. Now you pair that with For the People, which allows you to instantly pick up a survivor as long as you're healed, and this combination becomes extremely broken. You can hide near your friend while they're being chased, and as soon as they go down, pop the For the People Buckle Up while the killer's in their wipe animation, and suddenly for the next 10 seconds, the killer can't hit either of you, which gives you enough time to get to a pallet or a window or even a body blocking teammate. It's just an immediate get out of jail free card. It was insane. I will say this was a very, very fun perk combination to use, but of course, all fun things come to an end, especially when they have basically no counterplay. So I guess we just have to return to the classic For the People Soul Guard. All right, moving on to a killer perk combination, which was also relatively recent. This is Agitation Starstruck. Now, funnily enough, these perks haven't changed since this perk combination was really OP. It was the things around it that got nerfed. Starstruck makes it so that when you pick up a survivor, any other survivor within your terror radius becomes exposed for 30 seconds, and Agitation increases that terror radius by 12 meters when you're carrying a survivor. So every time you'd pick up a survivor, you'd get this huge radius of survivors becoming exposed. Now, the reason this was so strong is back in the day, Nurse's attacks did not count as special attacks, but rather they counted as blink attacks. So back then you could insta-down people that were exposed. So I'm sure you can imagine why this was broken, considering that Nurse was like one of the few killers that could actually take advantage of Starstruck. So what a lot of Nurse players would do is usually they would throw on Infectious Fright as a part of this, which makes survivors that are in your terror radius scream whenever you down someone. So they would down someone, everyone around them would scream, they'd pick up the survivor, drop them, and they have a general idea of where the survivors are because of the scream, and because they're Nurse, they're able to catch up and down the survivor within 30 seconds, getting so many insta-downs. It was absurd. Luckily, they changed it so that Nurse didn't do basic attacks anymore with her blinks, which made this perk combination a lot more useless. All right, I have another survivor perk combination, which I'm surprised flies under the radar, considering that it's still in the game right now. And this is Overcome with Lucky Break. Overcome is a very simple perk. If you're ever hit by the killer, that speed boost that you get is a lot longer, and Lucky Break makes it so that when you're injured, you don't leave any pools of blood or scratch marks for a maximum of 60 seconds. So this means that when you're hit, you gain so much distance on the killer while also not leaving scratch marks or pools of blood. So if you go around a corner, the killer's not going to be able to know where you went. And you can pair this with so many other perks as well, like Quick and Quiet, for example. So when you go around the corner, you can hop into a locker, and then the killer really doesn't know where you went. And you can even pair this with map offerings, like for Larry's. So there's just no way the killer's going to find you. Or you can pair it with stuff like Bite the Bullet and a med kit. So when you go around a wall, you can find a dark corner and start healing, and you'll be completely silent. This perk combination is very, very underrated. It is so good to lose the killer, and if you're trying to lose the killer, like if you enjoy the stealth play style, or if you're not really that good in chase, I would highly recommend trying this out, because low-key, on some maps, it's very, very overpowered. All right, now for another perk combination that's still in the game to this day, but I actually think it's honestly low-key balanced. Don't tell DBD Twitter I said that. But this is Plaything Pentimento. Oh god, I'm gonna get so much hate in the comments. Okay, let me explain what it is first, but then hear me out on why I think it's like kind of balanced. Okay, this combo is objectively like very, very strong. What Plaything does is every time you hook a unique survivor for the first time, a hex totem spawns somewhere on the map that's associated with them. While the hex totem is up, the survivor is completely oblivious, meaning they can't hear the terror radius or see the red stain of the killers. So of course, this is a pretty big downside, so the survivors are gonna want to cleanse the totem as soon as they can, but when they do cleanse the totem, that's when Pentimento comes into play. Hex Pentimento allows you to rekindle hex totems, which basically basically means revive them after they've been broken. And there's different stackable effects per totem that's rekindled on the map. So as long as one totem on the map is rekindled, it reduces all survivor repair speed by 30%. That is wild. Survivors can't just push through that. That is a massive, massive debuff. And then for like 2 rekindled totems, it reduces healing speed by 30%, etc., for 3, 4, and 5. But you're rarely ever going to get there anyway, so it doesn't even matter that much. But the fact that the first rekindled totem, as long as there's one rekindled totem on the map, the survivors have 30% reduced gen progression is insane. It's wild. And it affects every single one of them. Yes, this is an absurdly overpowered stat. Now, the reason I think it's balanced is because no one in their right mind is using Plaything without Pentimento. So if you know that there's a Plaything totem, A, don't cleanse it, because being oblivious really isn't as bad as you think, as long as you have a little bit of map awareness. And B, if you do know that the killer is using Plaything, then just look for the loud noise notification bubble when a survivor cleanses a totem, so that when Pentimento procs, you know exactly where to go to get rid of Pentimento. Like if you're keeping track of where the totems are, it's really not that big of a deal, even on solo queue. Regardless of the counterplay, it's still a very, very strong effect that's still in the game right now. One of the best perk combinations that you can use. Now, I want to take you back in time. Oh boy. I've mentioned this in a previous video relatively recently, but I think the strongest survivor perk combination to ever come to this game ever in DBD history was Will Make It Self-Care. Now I'm talking about the original versions of this perk. The original version of Self-Care let you self-heal yourself at 80% of the normal healing speed. The current Self-Care is 35%. So imagine how fast 80% was. You also had access to Will Make It, which was so overpowered back in the day. It did the same exact thing that it does nowadays, where when you unhook a survivor, you gain 100% healing speed for the next 2 minutes. Although I guess nowadays I think it's 90 seconds or something. But regardless, it's like a similar effect. But this perk was stackable up to 300% healing speed. So if you unhooked 3 different survivors, your healing speed would be 3 times as fast. And the craziest part about this was it also worked for personal healing speed. So you could self-care with this 300% healing speed boost and self-care in like literally 2 or 3 seconds. It was wild. You could vault a window, get hit, and heal before the killer could even catch up to you. All right, let's tone it down with the like just absurdly broken stuff and go back to something that's only mildly broken. This was the combination that was honestly relatively recent, and this is Pain Res Dead Man Switch. I can guarantee that all of you know what Pain Res is. I don't think I really need to explain it, but for those of you who are new or don't really know the names of perks, Pain Res is the one where a killer can hook a survivor and it'll randomly pop a generator for like 25% of its progression completely instantly, and it made the survivors on that generator scream as well, which counts as the survivors getting off the gen. And that's where Dead Man Switch comes into play. And at the time that this was really meta, Dead Man Switch would activate for 30 seconds after you hook a survivor, and any gen that stops getting repaired within those 30 seconds gets blocked until those 30 seconds are up. So you could pain res a gen and kick everybody off that gen, immediately blocking it for 30 seconds. And this was back when pain res didn't have a limit of uses. Nowadays, pain res only works once per survivor, so you only get 4 uses of it. But back when this was meta, pain res used to work every single time you hooked a survivor on a scourge hook. All right, moving on to the next survivor perk combo. This is Circle of Healing and Botany Knowledge. Circle of Healing came out in an absurdly broken state. This was a boon perk that when you bless a totem, any survivor within the radius has twice as fast heals, and it allowed you to self-care, albeit at half speed, without a medkit. This was already a very, very busted perk, allowing you to heal people extremely quickly, but then you pair that with Botany Knowledge, which increases healing speeds by 33%, stacking with Circle of Healing. I don't even think I need to explain why this was overpowered. Like, you could just heal so quickly. I remember watching this one clip of people being able to heal survivors off of the ground during the killer's hit animation cooldown. So the killer literally couldn't down anybody, because by the time their hit animation was up, the survivor was already healed. It was crazy. And the next killer combination on my list is pretty niche, but is one of my personal favorite combinations, even if it's not overpowered for most killers. And this is Monitor and Abuse and Infectious Fright. Oh my God, this is like the perfect synergy. Like, they are matched for each other. It is great. They're soulmates. It's amazing. Monitor and Abuse makes it so that your tear radius decreases by 8 meters while you're outside of a chase. And then when you're in a chase, your tear radius increases by 8 meters. And that pairs perfectly with Infectious Fright. Infectious Fright makes it so that when you down a survivor, any other survivor within your tear radius screams, revealing their location. So Monitor and Abuse makes your tear radius bigger while you're chasing a survivor, allowing Infectious Fright to have have a bigger range. And the reason I put this perk combination on this list is because if you play certain killers like Nurse or like Oni or like Myers, anyone that can get downs very quickly and snowball very quickly, this is an absurdly useful combination, especially if you haven't been performing very well in that match. Because as soon as you down someone, you know exactly where anybody is near you, which also gives you a great estimate of where other people could be on the map, especially as you get closer to endgame. So it is just free information for days, and I'd really recommend running it if you like to use those snowball killers. I'm also super excited to announce that I've launched a free DBD fan game called Dead by Daylight Observation Experiment. If you've ever heard of the I'm on Observation Duty series or Alternate Watch, this is a DBD themed game with the same exact mechanics, but it also has a ton of lore, puzzles, and hidden secrets that will take you down this wild rabbit hole. I've been hanging out in streamers' chats, watching them play, and they've been having a blast. So if you want to check it out, I have it linked in the description below. Again, it's a completely free-to-play fan game made entirely by me. I spent like a year working on this, learning game development and learning Unreal so I could provide you guys with an interactive experience. So I hope you all enjoy it, and if you stream it or you record it, feel free to send me a link on Twitter or in Discord, and I'll try my best to check it out. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like the one on screen now, so go check it out and see if I'm right.